Okay, now we're live on YouTube, but Edith, are you good?
Looks like the applicant is now in the meeting, so we should be able to begin.
Okay.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the March 9th, 2021 public hearing, public meeting of the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. I will call the roll. Chair Carroll.
Here.
Commissioner Bland. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum. Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Lutfi, you're muted.
Here.
Thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
Okay, we're all set.
Okay, thank you, and welcome to the March 9th public hearing and public meeting. Today, we will be starting the day with a public meeting item, which is a revised proposal for a project that has already had a public hearing and a prior public meeting, and for which we've already heard testimony and given comments. The public meeting item will be followed by our public hearing agenda for today. And this meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube. And if you'd like to watch the proceedings, please visit our YouTube channel and watch the live stream. If you would like to testify on any of the hearing items, please join the meeting at the estimated time for that item as shown in our agenda. And you can find the public hearing agenda on our website. And with that, I'll turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to lead us through the agendas.
Thanks, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. We'll start today with Preservation Department public meeting item, and it's item number 1, LPC 20-06856, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 97, Lot 9, 107 South Street in the South Street Seaport Historic District. This is a building built in 1818 to 1819 and altered in 1855, and the application is to construct a rooftop addition, alter the front and rear facades. This was last presented at the public meeting of November 17th, 2020. No action was taken at that time. The staff will now walk us through the changes to the proposal.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to note for the record that Commissioner Bland is recused on this item and is not present this morning.
Sorry. Good morning, Commissioners. Brian Blazak, Preservation staff. The subject property is 107 South Street. On August 11th, 2020, the Commissioners reviewed a proposal to construct a rooftop addition, alter the front and rear facades, and replace the storefront. Most Commissioners expressed concern over the presence of the dormer over the primary facade, the level of visibility of the bulkhead and railings at the roof, and felt the storefront was overly glassy. No action was taken. At the public meeting of November 17th, 2020, the applicant proposed a revised plan that included an extending the top floor in the same plane as the existing front facade. The Commissioners were split on this approach, with some feeling they could support extending the attic without a dormer, and others opposed to extending the attic floor at all. All Commissioners were united in expressing concern over the rear dormer and visibility of the bulkhead and railings over the primary facade. The lack of a bulkhead at the storefront also required further study. No action was taken. As a result, the proposal has been modified as a response to that feedback. The updated rendering shows the appurtenances visible over the primary facade, including the dormers at the front shed roof, rooftop bulkhead, and flat roofing section at the rear and dormer at the rear have been eliminated, simplifying the massing. This slide shows the proposal in elevation and in context with the neighboring buildings. and as rendered from the street level across the street on the south side of South Street. This slide shows the lack of visibility from the immediate sidewalk on the north side of South Street and a rendering of the storefront, which has been modified to include larger metal bulkheads in keeping with what is typical in the South Street Seaport Historic District. This slide shows the existing view from the FDR and as rendered with the addition, showing brick at the secondary east-facing elevation to match the existing below.
Okay.
This slide shows the existing view from the Brooklyn Bridge and the rendered view here. At the rear, the addition will also be clad in a red brick to match the existing below. And this section shows the proposed roof line in red for context. The architect, Thomas Barry, is here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, commissioners, do we have any questions for either Brian or the applicant? Okay, not seeing any questions. Rich, have we received any additional comments on this item from the public?
No, we have not.
Okay, thank you. All right, so not seeing any questions, I think we'll move to a discussion. So I'm going to start to request to unmute you. So if you see that request, just accept it. And we'll begin our discussion. So this is an item that, as I said, has come to us twice already. This is the third visit. And I think conceptually, the commission has always been comfortable with the idea of extending the roof line because this is in a row that had very steeply pitched roofs. But there were concerns last time, as Brian said, about the configuration of that roof, the large size of the dormer and the visibility of the dormer that was proposed, the flat section at the back, the bulkhead and rear dormer, and the sort of overall configuration was found to be overwhelming. And while the pitch was reduced in the second scheme when they proposed to raise the front facade, several commissioners felt uncomfortable with changing the historic fabric to accommodate a rooftop addition. So the proposal today really leaves the facade as it was, simplifies the roof line and eliminates the dormers and the bulkhead and the flat piece, and really just does that sort of inset terrace within the dormer. And so I'm going to turn to Commissioner Devonshire. Would you like to start this one? This is a district you know very well, and I think last time you felt very strongly about not raising that attic floor and eliminating the flat roof and the dormer. I think you also had concerns about the level of glassiness at the storefront. So why don't we start with you and see how you feel this has responded?
Thanks, Sarah. I really do. I think it's much improved, and you know, maybe third time's a charm. I really think they've hit the bullseye this time. I can approve this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Devonshire. I think the applicant has really adjusted the and listened to the objection from the commissioners, and I think this I can support this.
Commissioner Lutfi.
I agree. It's much more simplified, much more harmonious with the buildings around it, and I can approve it.
Commissioner Jefferson.
I can approve this.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, this is the roof line I imagined when this all started. This is fine, appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
I agree. This is appropriate.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
I agree.
Okay, and Commissioner Chapin.
Yes, I agree. The applicant's changes, I think, have made this very, very suitable and appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I think we're all in agreement that the proposed roof line is now designed as appropriate and in keeping with the character of the adjacent buildings in the historic district. So Commissioner Devonshire, would you go ahead and make the motion?
Sure. Thanks. In the matter of LPC 20-06856, 107 South Street in the South Street Seaport Historic District, an application to construct a rooftop addition, alter the front and rear facades and replace the storefront. I recommend approval, finding that the work will not damage or destroy any significant architectural features, that the steeply sloped roofs are a typical feature of the counting house building type as seen in many historic buildings in the historic district, particularly along South Street. Therefore, the shape of the proposed rooftop addition will recall this historic typology. That the building is located adjacent to the FDR highway, which limits views and reduces visual impact of the addition on the streetscape as seen from the street level. That this block of South Street has a variety of building heights and widths with sloped roofs, chimneys, dormers, and bulkheads seen above the cornice lines. Therefore, the rooftop addition will blend into the diverse streetscape and roofscape. That the design and materiality of the rooftop addition featuring zinc cladding and black finished metal windows and railings will be in keeping with the treatment of rooftop additions and other rooftop accretions found throughout the historic district. That the proposed ground floor infill consisting of a steel and glass storefront with recessed commercial and residential entrances will recall the open character of the historic bays. That the presence of painted signage on the front facade will recall the painted signage historically found in this historic district. The proposed alterations to the rear facade featuring punch, single, and combined openings with double hung windows at the existing and new floors will be in keeping with the rear facade surrounding buildings on the block. And the proposed work will support the long-term preservation of the building and the special architectural and historic character of the building and the historic district.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second it.
Okay, Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, that's approved. Thank you. And we'll now move to the hearing agenda.
Okay, the first public hearing item is item number 1, LPC 21-05680, an application for a binding report, the Borough of Staten Island, Block 76, Lot 200, 1000B Richmond Terrace, Building B, Sailor Snug Harbor Individual Landmark. This is a Greek Revival style dormitory building designed by Bernard Lefebvre and built in 1840 to 1841 as part of the Sailor Snug Harbor complex. The application is to construct a rooftop elevator bulkhead, modify windows and doors, and to install a new egress stair and louvers.
Commissioners, is my voice coming through pretty clear? Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. My name is John Fontillis. I'm a principal at the architectural firm H3. I will be presenting the exterior changes to Building B at the Snug Harbor Cultural Center, where we're renovating the building into an archive facility for the Staten Island Museum. Joining me today is Janice Monger, the executive director of the museum, in case there are any questions. I apologize. Am I to bring up the PDF, or is I thought staff was bringing up the
PDF is open on the screen. You can click on the screen and then use your mouse or the arrow keys to advance. Just click on the screen one time.
Perfect. Thank you. To orient you to the site, this is the North Shore of Staten Island, from where the ferry lands at St. George to the west, to where the Snug Harbor campus is located. The museum was originally located at 75 Stuyvesant Place and moved to Snug Harbor with the renovation of Building A on the campus in 2015. This project came before the commission in 2005. The 40-acre Snug Harbor campus was one of the very first, I apologize. Was one of the very first landmarks designated by the city in 1965 and was purchased by the city in 1971. Formerly the home for retired sailors, the first building dormitory was constructed in 1833, and at its height provided a home for 1,000 former sailors after their long life on the seas. Building B is one of the front five, notable ensemble of civic buildings from the Greek Revival period. In addition to being a New York City landmark, the front five are also individually listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and the grounds are a National Historic Landmark District. When the museum first came to the commission to review its move to Snug Harbor in 2005, the master plan was to connect Building A to Building B, with Building B housing their storage, archive, and galleries to display the natural history collection. Several education classrooms were also planned for Building B to expand programming for local schools. With the existing administrative offices in Building H, the museum would finally bring all of its staff, exhibitions, and collection storage together in temperature and humidity controlled conditions. These are photographs of the exterior of Building B, the north and the northwest corner facing Building A. And this is the rear of Building B on the southwest and the southeast sides of the building. I'd like to point out the hyphens. These are connecting corridors that are 1 story above ground and one above a basement level that provide all-weather connections between the buildings and the Snug Harbor campus. In 1984, a renovation of Building B was begun, but it was stopped in 1986 due to lack of funds. The building has remained in this condition for the past 35 years. Over time, leaks have developed around the skylights, and during Superstorm Sandy, the central ventilator blew off the roof. Part of our scope will be to repair the skylights and to restore the ventilator. Our scope is also limited to the basement archive storage level and the 3rd floor mechanical rooms. Our funding is limited, and although planned as part of the whole project, the public space improvements on the 1st and 2nd floor will take place during later phases of renovations. This is the current existing roof plan and our proposed roof plan. One of the exterior changes is an elevator bulkhead located above a half-constructed shaftway from the 1980s renovation. A section through the longitudinal axis of the building looking west, you can see the bulkhead just peeking up above the ridge line by about 1 foot. And in the transverse section, you'll see we tried to minimize the height of the bulkhead as much as possible. Another one of the changes that affects the exterior are insulated panels that we're placing behind the existing windows on the basement level archive storage rooms. They wrap around to the east elevation at the basement level as well. And similarly, we are installing new mechanical louvers at the existing windows for air intake and exhaust to the 3rd floor mechanical spaces. Also on this elevation, you can see a new cast iron egress stair that will exit from a new stair tower we're creating directly out to grade. We are maintaining the window opening, but we will drop the sill down to the floor to install a new door. This is the south elevation on the rear of the building. And this is the west side as well. The elevator bulkhead at Building B will be similar to the bulkhead that was installed at the renovation of Building A. You can see the bulkhead of A from B here, a window of Building B. In section, you'll see that we're trying to fit the cab, the overrun, and the roof deck all within a 12-foot, 1-inch dimension from the 3rd floor to the top of the roof. We will match the zinc copper metal panels that enclose Building A's bulkhead, which is also the material of the existing roof. Last week, we set up a mock-up of the building, of the bulkhead height on the roof. The photographs you see here are from 300 feet from the corner of the building. This is 225 feet, and this is 150 feet. It's a little hard to see here, but I'll try to enlarge so you can see the actual footprint. So you can see here the yellow caution tape and the four corners of the bulkhead. The trees that you see here are in the front of building B.
I'm just going to do it like, great, I'm glad that we're renegotiating the rent. We want everyone to be comfortable here. And, blah, blah,
And
blah.
then just to show you at 220 feet, 200 feet, here's the size of the bulkhead. And then lastly, apologize, this has a mind of its own. It's moving very quickly here. At about 150 feet, you can't see the bulkhead roof. It's disappearing behind the roof eave. From the north, the view from about 200 feet back here on the left and 100 feet back from the on the right. And again, I'm going to try this. Zoom in. Whoa, a little too far. The bulkhead corners here on the west side of building B. And then on about 100 feet closer, you can just see it start to disappear above the roof eave. This is a detailed shot of the plans for our ventilator. This is, we will replace the ventilator, which was saved by the museum staff during Sandy. They put it in the attic temporarily. Building D has a similar ventilator that we will match in terms of its finish. When we originally submitted the package, this was the photograph we showed of the front five. And this was our CAD version of the bulkhead and the ventilator in place. This is from the north. And likewise from the south side, this is the view from the parking lot and our CAD view of that view as well. For the egress stair on the east, it will be similar to an egress stair that is the adjacent building, building C, with cast iron treads and a pipe rail. The door will be new, but the design will be based on the existing panel doors in the basement of building B and will have the same color system. Here's the existing location at the east elevation. And this is our CAD mock-up of the installed stair. For the mechanical louvers at the eave line, just underneath the roof, we're detailing them to appear as two-leaf window shutters. The existing window lights, here's an interior view and here's an exterior view, will be removed, and in its place, a new louver system will be placed within the opening. And you can see here on the west elevation, the locations of those louvers. We've used as a reference these photographs of similar shutters. The dark colored panels we hope will recede back and allow the public windows on the first and second floor to be more prominent. Then lastly, at the basement level, the archive rooms will be temperature and humidity controlled. Therefore, we need to install insulated metal panels behind the existing windows in order to provide that humidity enclosure. But there will be access doors to provide access into the space in between so we can maintain them. The windows will remain, but we hope they appear blacked out from the exterior and will not be very prominent. And that is our presentation. We'd be glad to take any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this point? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll move to public testimony and then we may have some questions after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Anthony Fabre, our Director of Intergovernmental and Community Affairs, to lead us through the testimony.
Thank you, Sarah. We do have some signups, actually one signup, and I will bring that person in. That will be George Calderaro. Okay, so George, you should be able to unmute yourself and begin public testimony.
Morning, Commissioners. I'm George Calderaro, Chair of the Preservation Committee of the Victorian Society, New York. The Victorian Society, New York, founded in New York City in 1966, is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The VSNY thanks the Commission for this opportunity to comment upon and support the proposed changes to this extremely important individual landmark. The VSNY finds that cladding, the modestly scaled roof bulkhead in galvanized sheet metal, matching the sheet metal used on the roof of this new buildings and others within this group, will help minimize the obtrusiveness and visibility of the new bulkhead. That installing louvers resembling shutters on the third floor window openings added to the building early in the 20th century will not require the removal of any historic material, and that because shutters were historically used to seal unneeded windows will not present an ahistorical appearance. That creating a new door opening on the rear facade by removing one window, the sill, and the masonry panel below the sill will not require the removal of a significant amount of historic materials. That the exit door will resemble others in place at this building in terms of size, proportions, materials, details, and finish. And further, that the black painted exit stairs and railings, also resembling others in the complex, have been designed in a simple, straightforward manner which will not draw undue attention to themselves. And finally, that the insulated panels the applicant is proposing to install behind the basement window sash will be virtually invisible. The VSNY thanks the applicant for the decision to restore and reinstall the historic roof vent. Thank you.
Thank you. We do not have any more signups, and we do not have any more hands raised for this item.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so
Sorry, do we
Mr.
want to note another additional written testimony?
Yes, thank you, Rich.
Sure.
Do
So
we have any?
yes, we received a letter from Staten Island Community Board 1, and they had no objection to the project.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the testimony was very supportive, but Mr. Fontelis, is there any final comment you'd like to make before we move to our discussion?
No comments.
Okay, all right. Commissioners, any final questions? Okay, I'm going to start unmuting you all. Oh, yes, Commissioner Devonshire, please go ahead.
Sorry, Sarah. I just wanted to confirm, I don't believe that those belly windows on the attic level are original. Can you confirm that? I seem to recall they're replacements.
That's correct. They
okay.
Yes, they are replacements installed about in the 1990s.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so we'll go ahead and close the hearing and begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so we'll remember there are several components at the roof. It's the elevator bulkhead, which is continuing a shaft that was built in the 1980s, and then mechanical louvers at the attic windows and blackout panels at behind the windows at the basement level, and then the new egress door. And Commissioner Gustafson, I know as a resident commissioner, you're very familiar with this site. So would you like to begin this discussion?
Sure. I get to start with the rarely said words. This is actually in my neighborhood. And this may be the very first time in years I've ever said that. I guess George could have written my comments about this. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the north view, while the building is accessible by the public and viewable by the public on a 360 basis, the north view from Richmond Terrace, that direction is the money view of these buildings, the drama of the five. And I think as you see in the presentation, there's very little to be seen among these changes from that point of view. The the override bulkhead, I think is, the materials are exactly right. It's minimally visible. This is that was the south view. And so the way you see it most is from the direction of a parking lot. And it's actually what I would call a sort of the service view of all of the buildings. The new stairway, although when you see those, they give you a couple of points of view on that new stairway and the replacement of the window with the door. Those angles are angles that you will either cannot get, or they are from, again, the secondary facade of the building. I think they're doing the change there in the most minimally damaging way possible. I'm okay with the shutters. And in terms of the material for the stairway, which is cast iron, that is in these buildings the material of choice for the surface sides of the buildings. So I think this is completely appropriate. I think they did as always, the work that's done on these buildings is truly a first class, and they put a lot of thought into it. So I'm fine as is.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I'm in agreement with every aspect of what Commissioner Gustafson just said. I just think that we could only hope for this kind of approach in other adaptive reuse cases, where the program is very important and the historic fabric is very important, and somehow the two can happen without causing damage or changing the kind of the character of the historic building, and yet adapting it to new uses. I think it's a really positive project.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith.
Well, I think Commissioner Gustafson and Commissioner Shamir Barron said it all actually perfectly, as well as the testimony. It's a really great adaptation, and really excited to see these buildings get further use. Our office worked on these projects years ago, and lack of funding stopped those projects. So it's nice to see, even though it's incremental, little progress being made on these fantastic buildings. So very much in favor and support.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I find that these changes are necessary, and they were done very sensitively. I agree with the comments of the Victorian Society, which were quite detailed, and Commissioner Gustafson. And, the elevator bulkhead, the egress stairs, the louvers, I think they're all done well, and this is totally approvable.
Thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, these are such incredible buildings. We worked on that, our office worked on that master plan, and I have to say that the administration at Snug Harbor really cares a lot about these buildings, and I think this has been an amazingly sensitive approach. And I'm very happy that Staten Island's only mastodon will have a new environment in which to thrive.
Thanks. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with the commissioners. This is very sensitively done. More importantly, I have to thank Commissioner Gustafson for extending the courtesy for us to visit his hometown last week. And it's an eye-opener, and we will try to convey more of that borough.
Thank you. Commissioner Bland, I don't know if you saw enough of it to comment.
I think I did. I can say also that my office has never worked on this wonderful project. I feel left out. In any event, I did see enough of it to know that these relatively minor changes, so important for the continued contemporary use of this building, is completely appropriate, and I laud it like everybody else has been doing.
Great. Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with my fellow commissioners, and good luck with doing this and getting it done. And I can only hope that the following phases don't have such a long time lapse, from the end of this one.
Yes, agree. Commissioner Jefferson.
I think the architectural elements have been handled sensitively, and I can approve this project.
Okay, great. All right, so again, it sounds like we are all in agreement that these changes are very sensitive and have minimal impact on architectural character and architectural fabric and allow for this adaptive use, which is this important programming, which is important to the neighborhood and the city. So I think we'll go ahead and do the vote. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you make this motion?
In the matter of LPC 21-05680, 1000B, Richmond Terrace, Building B of the Sailors, Snug Harbor, an individual landmark. The application is to construct a rooftop elevator bulkhead, modify windows and doors, and to install a new egress stair and louvers. I note that Building B is part of 5 individually landmarked Greek Revival style buildings that are connected by hyphens and are part of Sailors Snug Harbor, and that the front 5 are part of a complex of buildings and open space with a variety of uses under the control of the Snug Harbor Cultural Center. I further note that an elevator bulkhead was approved for this building pursuant to Commission Binding Report 08-7783, but was never constructed, and that the building has remained vacant for many years. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will support the adaptive reuse of this vacant building as a museum, that the construction of the bulkhead will not damage or destroy any significant architectural features of the roof, that the form and cladding of the elevator override bulkhead will match the existing bulkhead at Building A and will maintain consistency between the 2 roof lines, that the bulkhead will be only minimally visible from select locations within the Snug Harbor Cultural Center complex and will not overwhelm the roof line, that the modest scale and neutral gray metal cladding will not call undue attention to the installation, that the new entrance and stairs at the secondary east facade of the building will remove a simple multi-light double-hung replacement window and a minimal portion of plain masonry and cast stone and will not eliminate significant historic fabric, that the proposed paneled single leaf door and metal and wood stair will match the design details, configuration, and finish of other doors and exterior stairs found throughout the Snug Harbor complex, that the proposed insulated infill panels at the ground floor multi-light windows will be installed behind the existing windows with the screen in front and will not detract from the fenestration, that the proposed louvers at the attic level window openings will feature a paired configuration which recalls closed window shutters typical of buildings of this age and style, and that the proposed work will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of this individual landmark and will make the building viable as a museum within the Snug Harbor Cultural Center complex.
Okay. And Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and unopposed, the motion carries.
All right, that's approved. Good luck and thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say on behalf of the museum, that's a very motivating after a difficult year. So thank you for all the comments and your
Great.
approval.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Best
commissioners.
of luck.
Okay, we're going to move to public hearing item number 2, LPC 21-04970, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 1676, lot 54, 359 Decatur Street in the Bedford-Stuyvesant expanded Stuyvesant Heights Historic District. This is a neo-Greek style row house designed by Louis Accor and built in 1880. The application is to construct a rear yard addition.
And commissioners, please note that staff will be presenting this proposal. The applicants are available for any questions. And staff, you may begin.
Hello, good morning, Commissioners. Richard Larry, LPC staff. I will be presenting the proposal and the architect, Ellen Martin, is here to answer any questions. As you can see from the map of the district, 359 Decatur is located on the north side of Decatur Street between Stuyvesant Avenue and Malcolm X Boulevard. And the proposal is to construct a 2-story addition at the rear. The reason for the public hearing is that a 2-story rear addition is taller than the predominant height of the rear additions at the row houses within this block, which is 1 story. As you can see from the visibility photographs, none of the proposed work at the parlor floor and basement floor of the rear will be visible from any public thoroughfares. Here we can see the front facade of the subject property from the tax photographs to the current. And here we have a collage of the rear facade of the subject property and the rear facades of the neighboring properties. So go back. Sorry. Currently, you can see that there's a partial width one-story rear addition, which is about, and the current proposal is to expand at the basement floor, not going or exceeding the current depth of about 10.5 feet, and a one-story setback addition at the parlor floor. And just a quick zoning diagram to say that the addition is as of right. Currently, the floor plans for the existing building and the floor plans for the proposed building. And as you can see, the setback, which is about 3'8" from the rear facade of the basement portion of the addition, will house a sort of outdoor living space with a sort of a rear deck and stairs that are leading down into the rear yard. The construction is stucco coated, and the roof of the parlor floor addition has a very slight dip down to provide runoff. And all the gutters and drainage is all interior. Here we are for the proposed rear elevation. And sorry, the existing one here is the proposed rear elevation. And here is the section. And then the side elevation with the materials palette that they are proposing. So it's a sort of a medium gray tinted stucco for the exterior of the addition. Are there any questions?
Okay, commissioners, are there any questions? Okay, not seeing any questions at this time. We'll move to public testimony, and then after that, we can maybe have the applicant speak, see if we have any other questions. So if you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I'll turn it over to Anthony Fabre to walk us through the testimony. And if we can just put the testimony slide up so that the public can see the number or the meeting ID to call in, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay,
Anthony.
Thank you. We do not have any signups for this item, but we do have a hand raised. We'll bring him in. Okay, you should be in the meeting. You would need to unmute yourself. Garrow, are you able to? Okay, I'll ask you to unmute.
Yeah, I want to comment
okay,
on another item that's coming up later in the meeting.
Okay, all right, no problem. We can move you back into the attendee list. So we, oh, okay. So Ronnie is trying to come into the meeting as well. I've just been notified, so I will bring you in. Ronnie, can you hear us? You just have to unmute yourself.
Ronnie, you need to accept my request to unmute you.
Yes, hi, good morning.
Great,
good morning.
Hi, the reason why I'm actually in this meeting is because I am the adjacent building, 361 Decatur Street. And I have concerns about the width of the extension. My home is actually over 100 years old, and I'm afraid that it may jeopardize the integrity of my foundation as well as my structure.
Okay. All right, we'll ask the applicant to address that as well. Thank you. All right.
Now, will they also stay in compliance with DCP's Rule 1088 as well?
Yes, that would be required.
Okay. And I also have concerns with it, with my airspace as well as my direct sunlight for the second floor.
Okay. Thank you. So we do not have any other hands raised for this item.
Okay, great. And Rich, did we receive any written testimony or a resolution from the community board?
Yes, we did receive a resolution from the board. Just give me 1 second as I pull that up. Sorry, give me 1 second. I apologize for the delay. Yes, so Brooklyn Community Board 3 recommended approval, though they noted concerns with the ground floor rear door configuration and asked that it align with the third floor window, and that LPC should review the sloping roof and parlor level rear extension, as well as the terrace railing detail, the placement of the air conditioning equipment, and the position and placement of the gutter and downspout.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so I'd like to turn to the applicant now and ask the applicant if they would like to respond to the testimony, both the suggestions made by the community board, as well as the questions in the testimony about the following of the technical TPPN 1088 at Department of Buildings to ensure structural safety.
Hi, I'm Ellen Martin. I'm the architect for the owners of 359 Decatur. And obviously safety is paramount both to occupants and to the neighbors. And we would take all required precautions, inspections, et cetera, to ensure the integrity of the neighboring buildings as well as our building. So that is, definitely first and foremost for my client. As far as the alignment of the window, we are aligning on, I guess it's the east side. The west side, we just needed to make the window a little bit bigger to fulfill the light and air requirements, but we definitely trying to be contextual in our window placement. As well, the air conditioners we're placing as close to our building as possible and under the stairs, so to minimize impact to the neighbors. The roof drainage, we've set all interior, so we won't have any additional downspouts projected.
Okay, thank you.
Issues, yeah.
Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any final questions. So I think we will move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. So I'm starting to request to unmute all of you. If you can accept that, that would be great. And Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion? Great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to begin. Oh, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. And now we'll begin our discussion. So it's for a two-story rear yard addition, although the second floor is set back from the first floor of the addition, which is at the basement level. And it's in the elevation drawing before us. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I actually think this project is very well done. It's extremely modest and understated and works well in terms of its scale and its depth, and I think in terms of its materiality. And I don't have a problem with the color. I don't have a problem with the fenestration. The door at the base is fine. It's great to let as much light in as you can at the ground level. And then I think the color is very understated, and it works well with everything that's around it. So I can definitely approve this.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yes, very simple design, as was said, and I can approve this.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson.
I can approve this as is as well. I would just note for the benefit of the neighbor that we can't consider light and air as a factor when we decide whether or not to approve. And so I find this appropriate as is.
Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
I'm in agreement. I think this is appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
I agree. I think it's very appropriate. I know everyone else was okay with the color. I thought it was a little dark, but I'm happy to go along with it if everyone else agrees.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, I find it appropriate, and it's actually quite similar to the next door neighbors, you know, in of the look, you know, and I think it's appropriate to the district.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, I don't know if you saw enough of this when you joined the meeting today.
I did a quick check, and it looks fine to me. I have no concerns.
Thanks. Commissioner Devonshire?
I think it's an appropriate approach to an addition. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Chen?
I agree with everyone's comment. Very modest in scale and not visible from the outside, and they retain the top floor.
Okay. And Commissioner Bland?
Agreed. Appropriate, respects, I think, the neighbors as well as the donut. So it's appropriate.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I think we're all in agreement on this one as well. And I do think that having the second floor set back will help it to relate better to its context. And I think that the windows and doors are modest and retain a residential scale, and tucking the AC unit under the stairs will also not detract from any of the context or the building itself. So we'll go ahead and vote on this one. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make the motion?
Sure. In the matter of LPC 21-04970, 359 Decatur Street, Bedford-Stuyvesant, expanded Stuyvesant Heights Historic District. Neo-Gothic style row house designed by Felix Acorn, built in 1980. The application is to the rear yard addition. I note that the building styles, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Bedford-Stuyvesant expanded Stuyvesant Heights Historic District. I recommend approval finding that the work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed rear yard addition will not be visible from a public thoroughfare. The addition will not rise to the full height of the rear yard, and the top floor will be retained, thereby preserving the building's relationship to others in the row. That the two-story addition with the setback second floor and associated deck is modest scale, and the projection of the basement floor of the addition into the rear yard will align with its neighbors, will be consistent with the average depth of other rear yard additions found throughout the block, and will not diminish the central green space. That the stucco clad rear yard addition will feature materials palette and ratio of solid to void that is consistent with other rear additions found throughout the block, and that the work will not detract from significant architectural features of the building or the historic district.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
I second the motion.
Thank you. Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
And Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 11 in favor and unopposed, the motion carries.
Okay, that's approved. Thank you very much. And we'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 3, LPC 21-02432, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 2072, Lot 1, 176 Washington Park in the Fort Greene Historic District. This is an Italian-style row house built circa 1868. The application is to modify facades and dormers, install windows, construct a rooftop bulkhead, screens, and railings, and to demolish a garage and construct a new building on a portion of the lot.
And commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation, and please be sure to unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Good morning. My name is Mary Kay Judy. I'm an architectural conservator. If you can bear with us a moment, you are running very efficiently this morning, and our team is coming on. But I'm happy to be here to talk about this project. 176 Washington Park is a very interesting house. It is been in decline for many decades, and we are here to talk about the restoration and also about the proposed new addition. So the house was built in 1868. It was built just completed a year after the park, and the first owner of the house was William Kingsley, who was very instrumental in the Brooklyn Bridge. The next owner was Dr. Takami. He was an immigrant from Osaka, Japan, and he began his career in America as a cook at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So he bought the house in 1916, and he used it for his both his practice and his home. He turned it into apartments in the late 40s, and then the house was sold in about 1970. And unfortunately, that's when a period of decline began with the house and almost abandonment. So the house today doesn't have any services. It has holes in the roof. It's in very bad condition. And it was the victim of an attempted deed theft just a few years ago. So when that was discovered, it precipitated the sale by the legitimate owner, and it was being sold in 2019 as a teardown. But a committed group of investors committed to its restoration and rehabilitation came together. They purchased the property last summer during the pandemic, and they have committed to, as I mentioned, the restoration, the rehabilitation, and also to maintain it as a multifamily. So it'll be one apartment per floor. And they've also proposed to do an addition, which will be a 6th unit. So not only have they committed to the restoration and rehabilitation, but they've also really committed to design excellence. And their selected design team includes Ted Kane, who's based here in Dumbo, Brooklyn, and also Tom Main, principal of Morphosis in Los Angeles. So Tom and Ted worked together for about 10 years, collaborating, and so they have come together on this project. And so one of the things we did, we knew this was a very sensitive site. It's a very unusual site because it's on this corner lot. It has a deep yard. But we began by talking about what design precedents are in historic districts. We began with the Ulrich Franzen new building in Brooklyn Heights. That was the first building that was permitted by the Landmarks Commission in 1967. And so we looked at a lot of other precedents. I have to say that this was kind of like one of our go-to documents, was looking at this document that the LPC put together. And so we looked carefully at precedents. And the other interesting thing that we looked at was that in Los Angeles, where most of Tom Main's early work is, that 4 properties, including 2 residential additions, are now listed by the LA Conservancy as historic sites. And the Los Angeles City Planning LA Historic Places also list 2 Morphosis projects. So, and Tom Main is very intimate with this site as he spends time in New York at Pratt and as other projects. He spends time in the building next door at 11 Willoughby. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ted Kane, the architect of record.
Yes, my name is Ted Kane. I'm an architect. There's actually 2 components to the project. As mentioned, there's the townhouse at the front, which is an 1868 building, as well as the rear addition that we're proposing, which is designed by Tom Main. So Tom and I used to work for Tom in Los Angeles before I started my office. I moved to New York and then started my office here. So it's really a great opportunity for us to work together again, and it's been a really exciting project for us. Just to give some background, if you're not familiar with the site, it's a very prominent location across from Washington Park. So it's at the corner of Willoughby and Washington Park. Willoughby being a very kind of pedestrian, especially at this time, was open streets. It's become kind of a pedestrian corridor to the park. And so it's really a prominent corner for the neighborhood. And up to this point, it's been kind of abandoned for many years. And so this is, our client is, committed to kind of bringing this building back and really reinvigorating this prominent corner. So looking at the history of the project of this site, it was built in 1868. It's part of 4 townhouses that were built together. Our site at the corner, as well as the one next door, had a mansard roof addition, which we believe was not original. And then this being a corner site also has a unique condition of frontage on Willoughby Street. So on the right picture, you see a tax photo from 1940 of the garage, which was added about that time. Looking at just the corner condition, this 1940 photo is our best kind of representation of what it looked like in 1868. We don't have any earlier representation, but we're using this as kind of a model of kind of the original character of the building and something that we want to kind of restore back to the building. Looking at some additional tax photos, 1958, 1973, you can see a lot of that character did get removed during a renovation at that time, and additional openings or larger openings were made at the mansard roof. At that point, there was a lot of kind of removal of the slate at the front and new roofing. So that part of that's kind of the history of the site. So we are working with what's there now and looking to build back, not necessarily kind of try and recreate exactly what was there, but working with what's there and looking at its history to bring it back to within the context of the site. Looking at the 2 streets, 2 very different streets on Washington Park are really a prominent row facing the park, mostly in the 4-story, 55 feet. Our building is 55 feet tall with the mansard roof. And very tall kind of parlor levels. So it's kind of a grand, townhouses facing the park. Around the corner is Willoughby Street's smaller scale buildings on this site, 3 stories. And you can kind of see, it's a little hard to see in the street view here, but you can see on the map on the bottom left there, our site is actually a very large site. It's almost half of the block on Willoughby. So that's a 204-foot block. And our lot is 100 feet. So we're kind of almost a 50-50 ratio on that site. So it's a kind of very unique condition of both being the end of the block on Washington Park, as well as kind of this end condition on Willoughby. And just because the nature of the site as it turns, it really opens to the park because the townhouse is on the axis of Washington Park and they're not at 90 degrees. So it opens up this corner condition, which also exposes the end of the Willoughby. So it's kind of a challenge of working within the context of this corner condition and 2 different blocks. So Tom is going to join us. He's from Los Angeles, so he's been running a little late. I don't know if he's joined us yet, but I'm going to talk mostly about the townhouse. And hopefully Tom will join us in time to talk about the carriage house design, which is the component here. If you're looking on Willoughby, it's where the original garage was, or it is currently. So just talking about the existing condition, the building has been, abandoned for a while. There's actually quite a bit of roof damage, water damage, especially between the 2 kind of fireplace, all the way down the building has been a lot of damage. So part of the challenge of the project is kind of restoring not only, the appearance of it, but actually the structure of it. So we will be kind of reinforcing the roof structure, having to reframe some of the roof above, as well as some of the joists in between. But we think we can keep, the brick structure is actually very stable. It's actually a very strong and well-built building. So we're working from the kind of strong bones and building it back from the interior as well as the exterior. So one of the advantages, or one of the kind of interesting things about it being abandoned for so long, it's like a time capsule on the inside. So there are really some beautiful features that we're also going to be keeping, the mantles, and there's some built-in woodwork and millwork, which actually remains from its original structure, which is really, one of the beauties of the building. This is the garage extension, which I mentioned. which is from 1940. The original plan for the project from the client was that this could be an additional unit to help support the kind of renovations of the project and make this kind of carriage house addition. This building, though, is really unstable. There was a large tree on the site, which the roots had kind of undermined this building, as well as it's really just a slab on grade. So there's no foundation to work from. So we are not planning to keep this, but working within this this rear yard condition, which is a very large, over 50 feet backyard. You see also here the extension, which was probably from in the 1890s, which is the kitchen extension, which is not the original to the building. So this is the overall kind of massing of the site, the existing condition massing, showing the 4th floor addition in 1890, the garage from 1940, as well as the kitchen extension. And you see a very kind of unusual site in that it's over 108 feet deep in the kind of corner of the site and 100 feet at the property line. In addition, it has an additional 5 feet right of way, which is where the fence line is. So the fence line is beyond the property line. Just to speak to some of the zoning. So we work with this idea of the rear yard garage original on the left is kind of a carriage house. We started at that point working with Tom. It's kind of like thinking about strategy. And one of the strategies was kind of a series of zoning studies that we did to look at how to kind of, and actually this site, just to speak about the zoning, it is R6B, which is a contextual district. It allows up to 50 feet of building height with a 40-foot base. It is a corner lot on a short block as well, so it allows 100% coverage within R6B. And then it basically allows you to go up to 50 feet height by zoning. So we looked at multiple strategies, but one of the key elements of the project we feel is the townhouse, or that we wanted to really maintain the strength of the corner of the townhouse, especially as we restore it back and it's very prominent corner. And we wanted to do an addition that didn't undermine that, but also took advantage of this additional space in the backyard, so that we could have what we're calling a carriage house design. And the strategy really was to connect at the kitchen level. So the kitchen is 19 feet, or actually it's 21 feet now. We will be connecting a little bit lower than that, but that it's kind of adjoining of these two buildings. So they're actually separate buildings abutting at that point with a separate entry. So the townhouse will be converted into 5 units. So each floor will be a two bedroom unit. And then this rear addition in Greene is a separate single family house. So it'll have an entrance off of Willoughby Street. So for the zoning, we looked at an outer court strategy, which allowed us to kind of create a buffer zone between these two buildings, but that they could both get light and air and connection through this interior court. So we're keeping everything at a 19-foot, which is basically at the parlor level ceiling, extending out, and then just in the back of the lot, extending 1 additional floor. So that's 30-foot height in the back and just 19-foot at the 2 other floors. So I'll just, this to show a little bit of the context of the block. Tom will speak a little bit more about the carriage house design overall strategy, but I want to show this as well. Just to show the kind of connection of directly to the park on the left, and that as the site opens up, it creates this kind of green buffer zone on the corner of our site. And part of this courtyard strategy as well is an idea of this landscape, kind of a connection to the park. So it's really, you're seeing this building through the park, and as you walk down Willoughby, the streetscape opens up towards the park. And it's kind of framed in a way by the Willoughby street wall. The existing site conditions, so there is a garage curb cut, which we'll be maintaining. You can see we're set back from the fence line. We'll be maintaining the fence as well. And this is just a site view looking straight down of the existing townhouse, and then the addition in the back, which creates kind of this interior court of shared light space. and a garden which connects to this the street garden along the street base. Here you see just the building in plan with the bulkhead. So one of the proposals for the new building, as we convert it into from 3-family to 5-family, it currently has a stairway. It's not legal as far as fire code, current fire codes. So we are adding a new fire stair, which extends up to the roof, which is a requirement by fire code. And that, so it does extend above the original, the bulkhead that's there will be removing, and this will be a new bulkhead. This axon is to show some of the elements that we're bringing back to the building. So we are restoring all the windows as well as the window framing and enclosure. We will be bringing back the slate roof to the mansard roof, as well as bringing back the cornice. So we think these kind of essential elements of the character of the original building are being restored, as well as a brownstone. At the rooftop, we are proposing a rooftop deck, which will be accessible by all the units. So you can see in the bulkhead, kind of two pieces to the bulkhead. One is the fire stair, which is going up to the roof, as well as a second smaller bulkhead, which is an extension of the 4th floor units. The 4th floor will have its own access to the roof, which will be in the back, and then the front access is the fire stair connection. And they do require, as well, connection across for fire code. So we have located that bulkhead. I'll speak in more detail. We have a mock-up of the bulkhead as well. But the strategy for it was to try and set it back as far as possible, so it's not visible from the two adjacent sidewalks. And we're putting it back 15 feet from the property line, which is another 5 feet from the sidewalks, so 20 feet off of Washington Park. And then on the other side, it's also being pushed to the north, so that from the Willoughby side, that it's also set back. It is a roof deck. We're going to be lowering actually the roof, because the original roof had a kind of double structure, and as I mentioned, it's been water damaged and really not structural stable right now. So what we're going to be doing is rebuilding that kind of platform of the roof, and it'll be a paver system, which shows the structure is actually lowered, so that the where you're standing is going to be below where the current roof is, so that we're trying to kind of really push everything down as much as we can to make it less visible to the street. So yeah, just to focus some of the elements of the roof, we are rebuilding what's still exists right now is like a wood cornice at the upper roof of the mansard roof. We'll be restoring that based on the existing elements. The cornice, which was lost to the main cornice, we will be rebuilding that as well. Out of metal, and we're looking to match, the tax photos as well as the building 2 doors down at 174, which currently has the mansard, which is pretty similar to the original. Other elements, we also have some mechanical on the roof for each of the units. So we're trying to also tuck this back. It's going to have a screen around it. So the mock-up that we have now is really just the screen elements, so the actual units will be smaller within that screen. So these are some photos of the mock-up. So it's not visible in this view. You may see just an edge of what we've mocked up of the guardrail component. But that guardrail is actually a very thin element. So we've mocked it up with metal framing, so it's a little bit bigger in the mock-up. So as you do move up, so Fort Greene Park is kind of a hill going up, so you're almost looking straight across it as you get further away towards the building. So at that point, the bulkhead will become more visible. So we've kind of enclosed that in more of a dark metal material, which is different from the historic kind of materials that we're maintaining, just to kind of create it's part of that silhouette, which you can see the existing bulkhead that was there that will be removed. We're lower than that actually, but it's it's wider, but it's kind of trying to set back as far as possible. But of course, when you get up to kind of elevation view, it becomes visible. Some additional views. We also have an appendix in the back, so we took multiple pictures from different vantage points. But here we're just showing kind of some of the overall views. And these are photos of the bulkhead. So this is representing the actual roof will be lower than this since we are kind of rebuilding the structure of the roof. But this maintains the height of where that guardrail will be, which will be 3'6". And then this is the bulkhead. So the folding part is the second stair, which will go to the 4th floor. And then the kind of extended part is the fire stair, which we are adding. So material-wise, we're really interested, to maintain that the materials are not really introducing to the original townhouse. We'll be restoring the brownstone with a kind of mortar mix to kind of remake that brownstone facade, as well as the enclosure and some of the details. We'll be repointing the bricks. We're looking to restore the brick back. Right now it has some paint and also some damage. We will be restoring the slate shingles at the mansard roof. We do have some existing on the site, which we can use as well as kind of restore to that same finish. For the bulkhead, we're proposing a standing seam metal in a dark gray, also in a kind of slate gray, a little bit darker color to kind of create a kind of more of a shadow effect. The other elements will be painted, so the cornice and some of the trim work will be in a darker gray, as well as the fencing and some of the railings. So this is a view towards the, looking down Willoughby Street, basically from the entrance to the park. So this kind of highlights some of the main features of what we're bringing back to the townhouse from the brownstone enclosures, as well as the refinishing back the brick to the original finish, original texture. We are maintaining some of the modern pieces that were a part of the history of the building. So at the mansard roof, there was these new additional openings. So we are maintaining those. We think they do add value to that unit. It's a beautiful view of the park. But there is some history on the block of kind of double hung larger box openings within the mansard roof. So we're kind of incorporating some of that language to kind of work with what's there, but also within the context. This is a view now without the trees. So we just wanted to show that actually this is going to be a very garden element. And so as you see the carriage house, which really is an extension of that street wall, also will become part of this kind of garden piece coming from the park. So this is kind of the conclusion of the townhouse portion. I wanted Tom to speak now. He's going to speak about the carriage house, which is really, they were developed together. It's really a site strategy between the two of maintaining this corner townhouse, as well as like an extension, which kind of helps the street frontage, but also creates this space kind of between the two buildings. So Tom, you can start now. I see that you joined.
Okay, yeah, I'm surprised here. I thought it was 8:15. Hello, everybody.
Moving fast.
Okay, it's a it was a really interesting little problem. I just about see it as a kind of a prototype of this kind of condition, in that you're looking at the site, which was the service site of the corner residence, of course, and lot 11 on the number 11 on this is the edge, is just ended, and it's a sheer and it's not finished. And so from the very beginning, we were looking at it in terms of a facade, a normative facade on the street, but really this second facade facing the existing corner residence. And it made it an extremely interesting project. It was this interstitial space. And from the beginning, we were interested in something that in some ways just about celebrated the history of Brooklyn and this typology. And that we're not interested, I guess I'm known for making whatever, strong buildings or active buildings, et cetera. And we had no interest in that whatsoever. We were interested in actually maintaining this and producing something that was clearly 21st century. And it's proving that there's still validity in resurrecting kind of history and expanding that. And it didn't seem like the site wanted anything kind of special. It didn't want kind of an icon. It was not necessary. It wanted something actually quite the opposite. It was about continuity. And then after that, it kind of defined itself. It was a kind of odd problem. It just follows the lot lines. And we got every inch we could get out of it, which is only 10. It's just actually slightly over 2,000 square feet.
Right.
And we're kind of making something out of nothing in a way. And as you see the sections, it's all kind of vertical. But then with that also, and it'll show up in other slides, I've been very interested in landscape, and I see landscape and architecture as singular. And all of our work is included the both things as part of a singular idea. And in this one, it'll be evident in everything you look at. The courtyard and the open space and a place for a specimen tree. And then in this case, an upper deck, which we put very specifically, a very serious planting. It's a 5 foot deep planting bed that allows us for another specimen tree. And we were interested in the use of landscape as absolutely a part of the broad idea. Let me see, am I controlling these, Ted, or are you controlling them?
Yeah, I can control
I guess you're definitely controlling them, right?
Yeah.
You want to go to the next slide?
Yeah. Oh, so there we go.
Okay, and then and again, just in an axiometric, kind of very kind of straightforward, and again, this kind of interstitial kind of piece that we're completing the block, and again, I've been fascinated with this problem. I've loved this condition in Paris and in Berlin and certain historic cities. This is really common, these infill places that make really interesting sites. And again, you can see at the beginning, it's just a kind of a backyard, front yard, whatever, with a service building and this blank face that was waiting for the next building, actually, that we're now completing. Okay, Ted. And yeah, here we go. And we're using literally the same height as the adjoining facade. And we're opening that up as a deck in terms of its south facing kind of condition. And again, we put the second lower courtyard is opening up to what's left of this yard. It's kind of interesting. Again, as an architect, I can't help but talk about it's the main building is still missing a facade. It's kind of really odd. It could have been a project actually to change or to add to that building a bit and give it its next facade. It's still this kind of unfinished thing, but the landscape is taking care of that. As you know, there are these big trees that are making it kind of tenable. Go ahead. And the continuity of brick, but in this case, my client in this case is my son, of course, and it was really interesting because he's a very fussy guy, and he's I can't remember, Ted. You're smiling at this. Is this Spanish actually, or is it Italian?
It's actually I think it's Danish.
Okay, it's an absolutely beautiful brick. It's a craft that's been lost. You see kind of this pre-manufactured stuff everywhere, and anybody that likes brick, it would be painful to look at it. And this is a beautiful, beautiful material. I swear, people will come by here just to look at the brick. It's going to be just amazing kind of stuff. And Ted, we've looked at I can't count the numbers of samples we've looked at of the type of the brick, and it's going to be groutless. And then after that, it's going to be all matte porcelain metal. But it's going to be a very kind of elegant, but very toned down kind of language. And again, there's no interest in making the material a kind of overt. It's going to be just absolutely kind of part of the community, other than the fact of its quality, because it's going to be really beautiful. And I don't know if you've ever, the seamless brick is absolutely beautiful. It's like Machu Picchu. You're just stacking things on top of each other without the grout. It's just absolutely, it'll be just absolutely beautiful. And at the same time, it's clearly energetic. We're using brick, it's surface, it's not structure, and we're allowing you to understand that. Brick doesn't span, it couldn't do this. It's in fact a concrete building, of course, and it's a modern building, but it has the surface and the tradition of the material. Okay, Ted. And again, the section, because of the size of the site, and it's also my interest as an architect, that the section is the spatial kind of component of the building. And again, this is a very small little property, and it has one kind of living space, which is the 2-story space, and it has a garage, which I understand in Brooklyn is quite unusual. I don't, it's not my territory, but I understand it's kind of very rare. And it's we kind of figured out how to use 3 floors and a basement. And again, what's important here, what's not shown in here, is that planter bed and the tree, and of this open space, which is going to be really kind of unique. And of course, from here, he can you can see Fort Greene. Okay, Ted?
Yep.
Again, I'm not quite sure. I don't know you people and what you've been asked to do while we're showing details, but what I can say is that it's extremely straightforward, and everything is made so the brick is absolutely kind of clean. And it's going to be it's going to be, you're going to perceive a building kind of made totally out of brick, and there's kind of nothing else. The details are extremely straightforward. And again, if anybody cares, Ted Kane, who put these drawings together, we worked together for, what is it, 10 years or so. And we're interested in a kind of a very detailed, kind of exquisite building at that level. And hopefully it'll become that. Okay. And then the photographs. And again, it's kind of a weird one to talk about. It's so straightforward. I'm not really sure how much to say about it. It's again, it's just the main facade, and the openings, everything about it is connected to its neighbor. And the lower thing, it just goes away. The metal is just dark surface, and it's hiding the garage door. We don't want to see anything. We want to see a simple surface, and we're suppressing the idea of the garage itself, the door. And it follows, it's as of right, it follows the typical setbacks, et cetera. And you're going to move in and move down. And by moving down a couple steps, we've formed a room of the court, of the open space. So you're going to feel like that's a space. And we treated the outspace literally like outside rooms. And at the same time, we gave it some privacy from the street. And then you can see here the tree in its indigenous condition. Okay. And then again, a series of planes. And I think it's going to be actually nicer than this in the light. It should be quite beautiful with the shadows. And again, the tree coming out, it'll be a specimen tree, the one you see on the deck, which will be very kind of important and I think kind of unusual actually. And then again, there's another landscape in the courtyard, and this will be, again, over time, it's going to slowly get less and less building and more kind of landscape. Okay. And of course, that's the view from the park. And then the front view, and I guess it's just what it is. It's pretty straightforward. But again, you see the tree coming through there. It's not quite as stark as this. Renderings make things look very kind of stark. But again, I think it's going to be something that's going to be absolutely kind of fitting in the neighborhood, although clearly a modern building. It was built in the 21st century. Ted, is that the last one?
Yep. Yeah.
And again, this end one, which is for me the most, the kind of the main facade, because again, this is what it's not a facade typical to Brooklyn. It's 2 facades. We treated it as, I guess, in some way, it's like a corner site, because you are seeing it from this leftover little piece of property next to the residence as you approach from Fort Greene, and it's the beginning of the block now. As you're walking to the block, it's actually a gateway or a threshold, right? As you're walking through the block, and I think will be understood as that.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I think we'll move to public testimony, and we may have questions after that. So I'm going to turn it over to Anthony Fabre to walk us through the testimony. If you're here in the meeting and would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance and then move to everyone else. Anthony?
Thank you. We do have a few signups. The first person that I am going to bring in is Joshua Smith. Oh, actually, do not see him in the meeting. So I'll move on to the next person. Oh, there he is. He just raised his hand. I will bring Joshua Smith in. Joshua, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute yourself.
Okay, and y'all can see me?
Yes, we can see you, we can hear you.
Great. Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Joshua Smith. I live on Washington Park. I'm very much in support of this project's proposed renovation of the 176 townhouse. Sorry, give me 1 second. Losing the window here. There we go. I'm very much in support of the proposed 176 townhouse renovation, and I think especially the restoration of a lot of the historic detail is great. What I feel more concerned about is the proposed carriage house design. To me, when I look at the renderings, that design looks very bulky to me. The mass of it feels concerning. I think some of those exterior walls maybe are a part of that, but it feels like that sort of facade overwhelms this historic street corner to me. It feels like it would become somewhat dominating. And so I feel concerned about the mass of it. And to me, the trees in the yard don't actually do a whole lot to sort of make that mass less dominating. When people are on Willoughby Street, rounding the corner, or sort of from the entrance of Fort Greene Park, to me, when I look at this design and the renderings, this really becomes the dominant, overwhelming site of that street corner. It becomes that proposed carriage house, which, if I'm candid, doesn't look like any carriage house I've ever seen. It looks sort of like a new row house, which is fine, hypothetically, but again, I feel concerned about the bulk and the mass. So that's my comment. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. Next up, I will bring in Stephen Hall. Okay, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute yourself. I will ask to unmute you. Okay, I think we might have to move him back into the meeting. And we can move on with the next speaker, which will be George Calderaro. George, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Hello again, Commissioners. George Calderaro from the Victorian Society, New York. Regarding the existing building, VSNY supports restorative work, including cementitious brownstone restoration, new wood windows, new and salvaged hexagonal roofing slates, new painted metal cornice set below the mansard, and restoration of the historic wood cornice at the top edge of the mansard. Further, the proposed roof bulkhead, HVAC equipment, and railings, while visible from Fort Greene Park, have been detailed in a simple, unobtrusive manner which will not draw undue attention to them. But regarding the new main cornice, we suggest the design be based on the cornice at 174 Washington Park, another house in this row, noting that the designation report states that of the 4 houses in the row, number 174 is the most intact. The pictures show that numbers 174, 75, and 76 originally had matching cornices. The subsequent recreation of the cornice at number 175 was not an accurate reproduction and shouldn't be used as a model for this building at number 176. And although we understand there is no requirement to recreate features missing at designation, we note that this may be the only chance we get for 50 years to have the coins, projecting window lintels, and doorway pediment restored. We urge the applicant to consider recreating them. We also note that as the applicant is proposing to alter the mansard level window openings in order to install the cornice, the awkward size and tripartite configuration of the large dormer should be reconsidered to restore a better sense of the historic openings at that level. Regarding the proposed new building, the Victorian Society supports the demolition of this minimally detailed mid-20th century garage and the restoration of the historic fence, gate, and posts, important as an apparent remnant of an early carriage drive. Regarding the design of what the applicant calls a carriage house, the VSNY sees as appropriate the deference in height to the height of 176, the retention of the historic courtyard garden, and the color palette of the proposed materials. However, the core 10 proposed for the large garage door is an industrial material that seems out of keeping with the character of this 19th century residential district, and it invariably stains adjacent materials. But our major concern is with the alignment of the freestanding pierced, although lovely, masonry wall with the front facade of the adjacent row of buildings at 11 through 19 Willoughby. Commissioners, as a rear yard carriage house, this building should be set back from the facade of its Willoughby Street neighbors to retain its subordinate place in the hierarchy. We also think the design would benefit from an overall simplification of the form, of its many components, planes and angles, which, along with its sharp contrast in style, serve to call attention to a structure that should be deferential to the main house. Finally, Commissioners, the applicant has provided photographs of several modern-style buildings built with Commission approval in various historic districts. The Victorian Society would like to note that these are by no means all successful accretions that have stood the test of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, I will bring in Kelly Carroll. Kelly, you should be in the meeting. Kelly, you just have to unmute yourself.
There we go. Sorry, there's always a lag. Thank you.
No problem.
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. HDC thanks the team for presenting this application to our committee. We appreciate and understand the decision to balance this long neglected house's modern alterations with its historic facade. Ultimately, we fell on the side of restoration, particularly in the case of the mansard stories windows. This proposal offers so many gestures back to the historic appearance that we feel returning the symmetrical arched top dormers to the roof to be a better solution. Given the corner prominence of this grand house, it has 3 visible facades. We believe that the cornice may have originally wrapped around to the rear facade. We ask that this and the presence and necessity of the rear chimney be further explored. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do see that Ben was able to join us, and he did sign up, so I will bring him into the meeting. Ben, you are in the meeting. You just have to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Oh, we can hear you.
Hi. My name is Ben Abelman. I am a native Brooklynite and a current resident of the Fort Greene, and I'm also an architect. I'm here today to offer my support for the proposed project. I believe that the proposed project will provide a gateway to the Fort Greene Historic District. The proposed project sits at the edge of the historic district with the carriage house abutting the row of townhouses on Willoughby Avenue, which are outside of the historic district, and also are on the short end of block 2072 and are visibly, as one walks through the Fort Greene Historic District, one sees that buildings along the short ends of blocks are different to the buildings along the long frontages. Conditions along these short frontages vary and are contain buildings that vary in scale and are typically more utilitarian in nature, and are also seen as private open spaces which are visibly accessible from the public realm. The scale of the proposed carriage house located on the short end of the block references the scale of the adjacent townhouses on Willoughby Avenue. The proposed base, while not brownstone, matches the color palette typical of garden level of brownstones, and the above masonry is contextual with windows and openings matching the scale and rhythm of the townhouses that they're adjacent to. As the carriage house facade approaches the proposed restored townhouse at the corner, it steps down in deference to the historic building at the intersection of Washington Park and Willoughby. It also creates space for a natural buffer, creating space for an existing tree to form a separation between the two portions of this project. The townhouse maintains its primary frontage on Washington Park, which I believe will be expertly restored, and it is set back from Willoughby Avenue by a small front yard between the property line and the facade. This front yard is expanded by the addition of the carriage house, and which creates vital open space for landscaping to create a separation between these two portions of the project. The two parts of this project, while unique, complement one another and are appropriate to the contextual surroundings into the local urban environment, creating a key demarcation into the historic district from Willoughby. I urge the commission to approve this project. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and sorry for being late.
Thank you, Ben. So I will bring in W. Garoshik. 1 second. Okay, you should be in the meeting.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. I think that the restoration of 176 is really quite desirable, with the possible exception of the dormers on the mansard. I think that it would be closer to the original to match the dormers at 175. They both are original. I heard some comments to the contrary, but they certainly go back into the 19th century, and were designated as landmarks. But that's my only objection to the building, 175. But the so-called carriage house is really not a carriage house or a garage, or although there's cars, openings for cars underneath, there are, it really bears no relationship to what exists. It's the insertion of a huge mass, and although the surface matches in color some of the buildings around it, it really is an entirely new structure. And even to the extent that it's not a new structure, that is where it's not built out through from the southern exposure to the north of its property line, it appears to be, that is to say, where it's not a new structure, the facade makes it appears to be a new structure, has nothing to do with the other houses. I'd like to point out that those other houses on on Willoughby Avenue, those 5 buildings, I believe, they are part of the historic district, and the lot is part of the historic district. And this is, again, no objection to color, but substantial objection to the massing of something that must be at least 4 times as big as the existing structure. I don't have anything more to say.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to reiterate that if you would like to make comments, just raise your hand. If you are on a phone, which I see there are 1 or 2 people on phone numbers, you just have to click *9 to raise your hand. So I see Stefano had raised his hand. I'm not sure if it's malfunctioning. It's raising its hand and then lowering again a few times. So if you are trying to testify, just click raise hand and let's see if I can bring you in. Okay, there. Oh, it's doing it again. I'll just try and bring you in and we can try it again. So you are in the meeting? And you are unmuted, so you just have to speak.
Yes, hi. Okay, thank you very much. You can hear me, yes?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you for your time and for the presentation. I'm speaking on behalf of the Washington Park Block Association, of which I'm the vice president, and we had written a letter to the executive director of the Historic District Council, which unfortunately we did not submit to you in time. So I'd like to read that now. We, the members of the Washington Park Block Association, are writing to you with regards to the application for the proposed renovation and new construction at 176 Washington Park. As you know, as you most likely are aware, the public, well, I can regard that. While we applaud the developers who purchased the building in their efforts to restore and renovate the existing townhouse, which has suffered serious neglect over the years, we are nonetheless highly concerned about the scale, nature, and aesthetics of the proposed new building. What they describe in their submitting plans is a carriage house that will replace the existing garage on Willoughby Avenue. In short, the proposed new building, which bears no resemblance to the historic carriage houses that dot particular streets in the Fort Greene and Clinton Hill neighborhood, is not in any sense of the term a carriage house. It is a new construction that replaces a low-lying existing garage that is less than 9 feet tall and sits at the rear of the property. With a multi-tier and potentially multi-family cantilevered structure that, according to the plan submitted, rises 30 feet high and whose mass extends to the sidewalk on the eastern side of the structure. It's designed with a series of vertical and planar walls that form a fragmented, jagged facade, not only has no relation to the historic character of the neighborhood architecture, but profoundly obtrusive, aggressively asserting an idiosyncratic architectural aesthetic in the midst of calm streets comprised almost entirely of 19th century brownstones and 18th century single houses. The proposed construction in question sits at a very important intersection, the corner of Washington Park and Willoughby Avenue, the latter which is one of the main entryways into the historic Fort Greene Park. The park, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux in 1867, is home to a national monument designed by McKim, Mead, and White to honor the victims of the prison ship during the Revolutionary War, which rises at the park's peak atop an elegant plaza and commanding staircase. In recognition of the importance of the egress at Willoughby Avenue, the Parks Department recently completed renovated its stairs, adding an accessibility ramp. A stop sign was placed at the corner of Washington Park and Willoughby Avenue, owing to the stream of pedestrians who enter the park at the crosswalk. During COVID, moreover, movable gates have been placed at every intersection eastward of the park along Willoughby Avenue for a number of blocks, providing for appropriate distance strolling, biking, and walking in the streets, where only local traffic is permitted. This decision by the city again reflects the recognition of the major importance of Willoughby Avenue to the neighborhood, its character, and its one visual experience will profoundly be disturbed and undermined by the proposed intrusive design, which bears no relation to the existing buildings in the neighborhood and fundamentally fails to recognize the historic importance of the streetscape and the park. The
So
Washington Park
I just wanted to note that your time is up. So if you could just finish up your comments.
Yes, thank you very much. Lastly, I'll just say that we, as I said, we very much appreciate and would like the renovation of the existing building to go forward. Unfortunately, and I don't mean this as a commentary, but the new structure has the unfelicitous look of a deconstructed building, which is to say, while you'll be renovating the existing building, which is in terrible repair, you are proposing to give us a new building, which will always have a basically broken windows quality of fragmented facades with planar elements that will never be, quote unquote, completed because it is part of the design. We thank you for your attention.
Thank you. So I don't see anyone else with their hands raised. Actually, Stephen Hall, who did sign up, has joined us, so I will bring him in. Stephen, you are in the meeting.
Okay. I think I was going to speak last in terms of the people speaking in favor of the project. But I can speak
Yes, we have one other speaker after you who just joined us, so he will be going after you. That's the last signed up speaker.
All right, you want me to speak now then?
That's fine. You can go ahead and speak.
Okay, I've reviewed the project, and first of all, I want to say that I'm a longtime supporter and lover of the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and I live in a landmarks designated area. I live at 32 Morton Street. In fact, that was a designation from 1969, sort of 3 years after Landmarks was formed. So, and I really respect the committee, but I've looked at this project, and as I am the architect of the Pratt School of Architecture just down the street on Willoughby, I have to say that when we were unanimously voted approval on that project, that it was a big plus because it brings the feeling of contemporary architecture to a really strong and beautiful neighborhood. And I think this project similarly has that feeling. It completes a corner and it does it in a way that creates a space. You know, one of the things about muse houses, if you look at them, they also come with space, like, you know, Patchen Place, or I lived in a muse house many years ago on Charles Street. And there's not just the idea of the muse house, but there's the idea of creation of space. And I think that's what this design does. It makes this as of right 2,000 square foot carriage house also form a garden space. And that's the planar elements in the design are forming and help organize that as a kind of space. And I think that's good urbanism. And I also feel that it's important going forward that we, as a culture, allow contemporary expression in our time. And I think it's also a sign for young people to see that you can make good urbanism with a feeling of contemporary life. And that's what this project is about. You know, I was very happy to present in front of the Landmarks a number of times, and I realized that some adjustments might have to be made by the architects in regards to the comments in these committee meetings. And I think that those architects are willing to make adjustments. But I do think this is a very positive project, and it's a positive piece of urbanism on Willoughby Avenue that, by the way, the architecture students at Pratt walking down the street would love to visit and send a message that, yes, we can do good urbanism in the future as contemporary architects.
Okay, thank you. So next up is Henry Smith Miller, who was also signed up to speak and has joined us. Okay. Henry, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, do you want to see my picture? Okay, there.
Okay.
Hi. Well, I'm also an architect. I didn't design the Pratt building, but I work in it as a member of the faculty at the Pratt Graduate Program in Architecture. I have worked with the Landmarks Commission for several decades. And when this project came in front of my eyes, I actually looked at it very, very carefully. And what struck me was that the oddball corner lots in Brooklyn have always been a site for imagination and invention by the architects of whatever time period they were working in. Because those corners and those situations are not normal. And the usual wonderful brownstone model that's executed in the super block comes to a kind of a situation where the fit isn't perfect. And I first of all, I'm going to deal with a series of amazing parts of this project. One of which is, of course, the dexterity and design composition using a masonry language that actually, in a way, riffs like music off the standard model of the brownstone. But the thing that's really remarkable about this project, while it's doing all of that, which would be an aesthetic effort, those aesthetic efforts spring actually from a very, very careful reading of the zoning and building law of the city of New York. Now, I know that landmarks is meant to be an area where the subjective takes hold. It was founded because of the demise of Penn Station, and aesthetics are very important to the city and to, let's say, our environment, visual and otherwise. What I find really amazing with this project is not only does it comply with a kind of history of aesthetic invention that occurs at the corners of the large blocks of the borough of Brooklyn, but it also takes the rules and regulations that are really not part of Landmark's purview, and it works with them in such a way that these constraints are turned into a remarkable partnership between building law, and I mean zoning and a DOB, and also the aesthetics. So I'm arguing, of course, on behalf of the aesthetic question and the idea that the locations, these corners, are actually prime spots for kind of invention. And I wish I had a lot of pictures. When I drive around in Brooklyn on my way to Pratt to teach, I always look at the corners because that's where the architects face unusual situations. So I would ask the commission to actually consider this as a 21st century response to a condition that has been going on for a very long time. And that in this case, it is open lot with a terrible old garage. And I think that the applicant's proposal sets a very wonderful standard for the fusion of not only remarkable aesthetic dexterity and invention, which it's actually always found in the borough of Brooklyn, but also paying attention to other rules. Now, I realize that has nothing to do with this particular conference or the issues at hand, because Landmark's purview is more aesthetic. It's called contributing. But I wanted to recall and point out that unlike many, many other projects, this project is very deep in its creation and its origins. And the applicants have done an amazing job to meet these requirements. And I'm going to stop talking. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that is everyone who has signed up to speak, and I do not see any other hands raised. So I think that is it for this item.
Thank you, Anthony. And Rich, did we receive any additional written testimony?
Yes, we received 7 letters in support, including from neighbors, and Brooklyn CB2 recommended approval of the work on the main building, but rejected the addition.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd like to turn back to the applicant team and ask if you'd like to address some of the comments in the testimony, both with respect to the changes to the existing house as well as the new building addition. So, Mr. Main or Mr. Kane?
I don't have any specific response, but I think just talking a little bit about the bulk. So it's all in compliance with the zoning regulations, with bulk regulations, and we're actually underbuilt of what FAR is available. Also, we're on a corner lot. You're allowed 100% coverage, so we're closer to 60. We're actually under 60%, which is a coverage for an interior lot. So we're really underbuilding versus what you could have built in this location.
Okay, any other thoughts or comments that you want to address now that were raised in the testimony? No? Okay. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicants? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I guess we don't have questions, so we can, I'm going to start to unmute you or request to unmute you so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. Okay, and Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the hearing.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll now begin our discussion. And just commissioners, as you think about preparing your comments, if you could address both the changes on the main house as well as the new addition, that would be great. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Oh, yeah. Okay. This is why we hire good architects. This is a really cool project. There are many facets of it that are really excellent. It's a little bit scary to think that this is Mr. Main's restrained project. I guess we're just used to pure boredom here, but I think it's a very exciting and interesting project, and I support it. Let me explain why and go into some detail. In terms of the existing house, I think the bulkhead is minimally visible from the park. And I think that the applicant could look at maybe making it a little bit lighter. It might be a little bit less obtrusive if it weren't so dark. But I think that its bulk is minimal. Its height is kept to the minimum. I think the railing is appropriate. I think the applicant can work with staff on the detailing of the stucco reconstruction of the brownstone, operating under the principle that the contrast to of the new to the existing depends on a faithful restoration of the existing. I think that the cornice, I think the comment about the cornice that was made by the Victorian Society, I believe, bears investigation. And if we can make the cornice more accurately reflect the house, that's certainly a good thing. I think in terms of the dormer windows, I would suggest that the applicant, I think it's appropriate to have a larger window there. I don't think one has to restore the original historic dormer windows on the front because they are not present today. And I would suggest that if they want to do a larger window, it might be better to propose something that was that better harmonized with the existing facade and perhaps even with the building next door. Something that was centered, something, I don't think you need to really, I don't think it needs to be a replication, but I think it should be something that seeks to be in greater harmony with the neighbor and with the building itself. I think that the yeah, I think that I think that the detailing of the stucco and the facade should be as accurate as possible. In terms of the addition, I really think it's going to be cool. And apart from that, that's not a particularly historically appropriate way of evaluating things. I think that from a contextual perspective, from an appropriateness perspective, what we have here is something very unusual, but it's appropriate because it seeks to do, as Henry Smith Miller said, form a transition at a corner element at the end of a row where there was not historically a townhouse, and to try to transition volumetrically, urbanistically from the uniform row to the anomalous corner condition, made even more anomalous by the fact that it's not at 90 degrees. So I think that as an approach, it reminds me of the kind of townhouse ends where they abut, apartment buildings, where you have this kind of transition where you break the form and you try to transition from one set of rules to another. And by starting with the contextual height, the contextual fenestration pattern, and then letting it kind of erode and break down as you move around the structure, I think that achieves in a modern way, in a contemporary way, the same kind of effect that we see in other places where a two-dimensional facade rhythm turns into a three-dimensional volume as it meets a corner. I think the choice of the brick is appropriate. I think the height of the brick coming to kind of echo the rustication height of the building next door with the corten below, I think is a very clever, modern, appropriate way of signaling that kind of contextual relationship. And in general, the project reminds me a lot of the Hardy Holtzman Pfeiffer townhouse in the Village, where that was, I mean, I don't know whether this was officially heard from Hardy Holtzman Pfeiffer or whether it was a later interpretation of someone, that it was a kind of concretization of the explosion that created the building's problems in the first place. I mean, this in its own way, and very appropriate to the work of Mr. Main, is in its way an explosion of the contextual row of the townhouses into a kind of more fragmented sculptural form. And I think it's going to be really cool. And I think it's appropriate, more importantly.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Devonshire.
Well, with regard to the existing original building, I agree with everything that my colleague has mentioned with regard to the front dormer, the bulkhead, etc. With regard to, it's not an addition, it's a new building. So I'm not going to call it an addition. Unfortunately for me, I have become somewhat obsessed as of late with the phenomenon of World War I. And I have been looking through many documentaries that show the results of bombardments of Ypres and many other French and Belgian cities. And while there are many ways to express the facade of a new building and contemporary design, this one unfortunately leaves me with an impression of a demolished building. It's the screen wall that is really doing it. It evokes to me a ruined building, and it brings back to me all of those sort of now dated buildings that were created by sight And, in fact, there was not an explosion here, a la Hardy Holtzman Pfeiffer's building in the Village. This is a new construct that has all of the promise of a new building. And so what I would hope and what would make me pleased with this, everything that's going on behind the screen wall, I think is fine. I think the screen wall needs to be less prominent. It's actually boastful in its placement, completely flush with the building next door. I think it needs to be much less prominent. I agree with the testimony about the Corten steel. It is going to stain everything on the sidewalk in front of it. And so for me, with regard to the new building, the screen wall needs to be reduced in size. It needs to be pulled back from the facade of the building next door so that it's not flush. The brick is fine. It's beautiful brick, and I would like to see a new material on the doors at the sidewalk level.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I agree with Michael Goldblum and some of the comments that Commissioner Devonshire just mentioned. I think Corten steel definitely will stain sidewalk, as we learned from New Haven, the examples. I do think that the getting on the original building, the corner building, I obviously I do not know how to handle the situation, but obviously there were lintels there on the adjoining buildings, and the sills and the rustification. And so I would urge the applicant to take a look at that. And obviously that dormer issue, the enlarged dormer that both Michael mentioned, how's the best way to handle that. In terms of the building in the back, I would say that the height of the screen wall is maybe too tall or too large in the context. So I think I agree with the comments that it should be restudied a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite something that Brooklyn will have a carriage house by David I.J. and now a carriage house, whatever we're going to call this, by Tom Main. And I found it very exciting, all of the testimony exciting, but it was especially extraordinary to have both Stephen Hall and Henry Smith Miller opine in a very, very articulate way, both of them, on this very interesting and super interesting ensemble. In a nutshell, I think this is why I like being on this commission. It involves the restoration, really, in many ways, by replicating some aspects of a building, an important house that had been allowed to deteriorate into almost a ruin. If it were more of a ruin, I would think we would maybe not be as concerned about replicating elements and returning it to more or less its original outside condition. But it didn't go that far, and so I think the appropriate kit of parts on the existing building is the right approach. It's been said maybe they could work to reduce the height or visibility a little bit, but it doesn't really bother me of the bulkhead. And the rest of the comments have been made. I do support the idea of investigating putting the cornice all the way around the back. If that's deemed to be an important aspect, it will be quite visible, and I think therefore an important thing to do. As Henry Smith Miller so accurately pointed out, these corner conditions in all brownstone neighborhoods, but particularly it seems to be in Brooklyn, I think, are really juicy and interesting affairs. They necessarily break the context of rows, but then create their own context in terms of of this condition, which occurs block after block after block, and everyone seems to be somewhat different. I'm a great fan of what Tom Main has proposed here. I think the fusion, if you will, of new and old, of historic and vibrant new, is all about what New York City and Brooklyn is about. I think it's a physical evocation of that realm that we live in. So, rather than pick at any of it, it's in the hands of a master. I'll let it alone, save one thing. I do think that the screen wall is too high, but not generally too high. I think it rivals and unfortunately demeans a little bit the cornice of the building next door. So I would bring it down only to the height of the beginning of the cornice next door. Otherwise, I think this is a little piece of genius, and I think it will actually enhance the neighborhood and make people think about what urbanism really is about, which is always about new and old.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Lefty.
I would like to first thank and applaud the group of people in the, I'm going to say in the community. I'm assuming that some of them were from the community that got together to really finally do something to revitalize this building, which has been languishing on the corner for so long. And I think the approach that the applicant has made to restoring it is laudable. I agree with some of the comments that it makes sense to work with staff to ensure that the finishes are top notch. I do also think it would be interesting to explore whether or not the cornice should continue in the back. I don't have a problem with the bulkhead, and I don't have a problem with the windows. They don't need to be arched and the mansard. Can we turn to page 31, please? I am a huge fan of all of the architects who spoke today. And I do appreciate everything that was brought to the table from in terms of including modernism and modern buildings in the footprint of historic districts and doing it in a way that not only reflects modern architecture within the broader context and makes a statement, but just one that adds to the neighborhood in many ways. I think this is a terrific project on a lot of levels, but I think it needs just a little refining. I don't have a problem with the materiality. I think it's beautiful, and just hearing Tom Main talk about it got me very excited. I do think that, I agree, corners are important, and what happens when you turn the corner and look down the block is matters. And I feel like when I look at this particular angle of the project, I agree with those who have said that this kind of overwhelms the street a bit, and it competes. So my suggestion would be that, and there's something about the form that looks just a little institutional to me, almost like I'm entering a part of a campus. And that gives me a little bit of pause. So a few thoughts that I had were, number one, the front screen could be lowered quite a bit, I think. Or someone had mentioned, and it might have been someone from the Victorian Society, that the facade of this building be set back a little bit. And I kind of like that idea because it would enable the rest of the block to be intact, and it would enable this building to like have its own personality and make its own statement without competing in any way. And it would still visually have an impact as you turn the corner or look from afar. And in fact, I think it might even be better because it would, I like this idea of, coming upon a building and sort of seeing it as a surprise and a jewel in many respects, and not one that just kind of hits you in the face, which I think it's doing a little bit right now. The other thing I feel like is, and this adds to my feeling of like the whole you're entering a campus, is that it's not so much the column at the face of the building, but the one immediately next to it that comes up higher. I don't know, it's just throwing things off for me visually, and it makes me feel like I'm entering into an academic campus in some ways. And I feel like there might need to be a little tweaking there. Maybe that needs to come down, maybe it needs to come off. I'm not sure. I'm not having a problem with the the height of the next piece to the far left. So other than that, I think there's a lot of positive things here. And I'm, in terms of Michael Devonshire's comment about the court and steel, I can't speak to the problems of working with it visually. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I appreciate, his comment about maybe the applicant should look at that in terms of how it's going to wear over.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Yes. I started thinking about this project from the fabric, the historic fabric, and the idea of the continuity, the unity of the street facade, and the restoration of the existing building. It's important that the elements of that building be restored on Washington, I think, to keep the unity of that facade, the unity of that street, and as a fabric. And when you turn the corner, there's a space that could be used in a different way. Then the fabric of the existing the existing fabric from the corner back should remain the same. I think it's a brilliant scheme. I think the idea of diagonally looking into this space and seeing a different architectural language is quite compelling. And the only issue I have with it, the only issue, is the false front. Now, I can accept the false front. The form of it is a little strange. The cutout at the corner, making it an L shape, is okay, architecturally acceptable. But I think it either has to be pushed back from the fabric to say that the fabric has a dominant role in this, and this is pushed back from it, so that we know that this courtyard addition, this new building, is subordinate to the fabric, the architectural fabric that we made historical. And if they do that, it's fine. I think anything that happens in the courtyard is okay. I like the style language of the 30s is fine. The plainer language is fine. I think I think the language of the screen wall doesn't have to be the same language in the courtyard. It could follow the fabric language and enclose the courtyard in fabric, and within that courtyard, you have a different language. But that's the architect's role to decide that. But I think I can accept this project. I can support it.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Shamir Barron.
It's such an interesting project, and I agree with lots of aspects of various ideas that have been proposed, even in contradiction to each other, because I think this project can take a variety of kind of ideas and debate about it. I do, though, think that it is an appropriate solution to this condition. So I'll first say that I also agree with the thoughts about the cornice and the approach to the restoration of the historic piece for the most part. I'm not sure about the bulkhead, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference. The addition or the added piece in the back, I think as Michael Devonshire said, it's not exactly an addition. It would be an addition if it wanted to relate to the garage building itself, I think. Had that been the sort of the impetus to take the geometry of the garage building and to expand it a bit, I would have understood that as an addition. But I think that the architect departed from that notion and really wanted to tackle this corner, non-corner condition. It's the absence of a corner, really, and celebrate it or accentuate it or work with it. And I think to that extent, it's very successful in that I'm wondering, I keep wondering, had the approach been to pose a kind of a complete townhouse in this spot, would I have thought that appropriate? And I would have said no, because it would not have been appropriate for it to be a sort of typical townhouse with four walls as we know them and its own cornice, because then it wouldn't have related to the garage nor to the kind of the history ever since the kind of the 1886 map of a non-building there. So it's almost as though Tom Main's been waiting all these many years to find a really good reason to have a deconstructed active structure. And this is sort of the spot. It makes sense to me. And it recalls and speaks to, in my mind, maybe one of the most beautiful parks in the world, which is Fort Greene Park. It's a wild plan, that parallelogram plan. It's just spectacular. And the historic path in that's referenced in the 1886 map might even give reason to what seems like might be the kind of that Main's beam at that odd angle sort of relates to the kind of the embedded history of that Bairnsford path in Fort Greene Park, which is interesting to me. But I think above all, I think what is made here is a kind of, and maybe this is because the client is the architect's son, I'm not sure, but there is a certain intimacy, and actually I disagree. It is not institutional. I disagree. It doesn't, the height of the structure meeting the height of the adjacent cornice is not sort of too much. I don't think it needs to recede or sort of pay kind of a deference to the other buildings. I think everything about it makes sense, and additionally, it has a certain strange kind of intimacy or quiet about it. And in that sense, it's appropriate as well, in that it's really, I think, making an effort to work with the context, to be in its place. And for me, that's really being achieved here. So I support this project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
I think this is a really terrific project. It's very exciting. A lot has already been said, and I don't want to have to repeat what others have said, but I totally agree with the concept that was used here to sort of take the end of the row of Willoughby and create this courtyard with this sort of deconstructed fabric that sort of leads you to the townhouse. So I'm in support of the Carriage House new addition. I think that the townhouse restoration, the applicant could work with staff to work out the details of the brownstone. I think the dormers, as they are asymmetrical, is it appropriate? Because that is sort of part of the history of the building. And it feels to me like the building below the main cornice should represent the more historic period of the building, but perhaps the above the mansard portion could be a little more interpreted. I think there have been a lot of comments about the screen wall, and I had initial feelings that maybe it was too high, but I think that it's a composition that is it's been developed, and I think it's actually fine as it is.
Okay. And Commissioner Chapin.
With regard to the historic restoration, it's very nice. I agree with the Victorian Society and many of the other commissioners' comments that additions would be welcome, including looking more at the cornice. I think there were panels that seemed to be below the cornice in historic pictures, the additional window details and the door pediment. And I think that the element that works least for me is the current distribution of the windows on the upper story. And while that is a historic change, I think it would really improve the presentation of the building to use a different configuration of the windows. I don't find the bulkhead to be an issue. I think that the removal of the modern garage is totally appropriate. Like Commissioner Bland and Lufty, I appreciate and welcome seeing admirable modern architecture integrated into historic fabric. The statement that fine architecture makes is often difficult to integrate because it is easy for its strength of expression to take too much attention away from the historic content. And I do understand Commissioner Goldblum's view that the volumes can be seen transitionally. However, for me, there is no sense of how this new building relates to the past as a back building carriage house. At the street wall, it seems that it is seeking more to relate to the row house, as though there were a missing row house. When I think I think that's the wrong historic message. I too think that the front wall should not reference the row houses, but would be more appropriate as maybe a one-story straight street wall, or something maybe allowing more view back into the rear structure, perhaps even by using more transparent material on the face. The bricks, sculptural elements and plinths that echo walls and chimneys and employ multiple angles are both very interesting and inventive as architectural art, but I think really do call too much attention to themselves in this historic context, and also enclose the corner rather than opening it up. The site especially seems to enclose by the gesture to the row created by the screen wall and the plinth at the street wall, which seems like an intentional barrier to me visually. The base new building proposed is modern but successful and could certainly serve as an appropriate back building. However, I would like to see what I think are the most disruptive sculptural plinths at the street and the cross beam removed altogether, and possibly some additional alignment of some of the verticals in the back shortened and the planes aligned. In general, I think that the approach of creating the rear building, which acts as the carriage house, is very appropriate. But I think that some of the architectural elements are somewhat disruptive, and the front is too tall in my view, and also too related to the row houses rather than the sense of size of the carriage house. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to thank
Sarah?
the applicant.
Sarah?
Yes.
You skipped
Yes.
me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my goodness. Please go ahead, John. I'm very sorry about that.
That's okay. Well, on the row house, I think I support the restoration, restorative elements. I think that it is a bit of a lost opportunity. It does need to go a little further in some of the details. In particular, I would mention the fenestration in the mansard roof, which I think simply reiterates a mistake. The rooftop addition, to the extent that that could be recessed a bit more, that will be terrific. As far as demolition of the existing garage is concerned, that's fine. I think the footprint of the new, I guess I'm going to call it a new building because I don't think it's an addition. The new building is fine. I would reiterate what several of my fellow commissioners have said about the screen wall. I think it. For me, it seems it's not sure whether it's trying to be a primary facade or it's trying to be a secondary facade, and then several solutions were suggested, and I wouldn't dare contradict my architect friends on the commission. It could be lower. It could be set back from the street wall. I think there's a number of possible solutions there. The design generally of it is fine for me in terms of mixing the modern with the look of the district. So that's it.
Great. Thank you very much, John. Again, I apologize. That was helpful. Okay, I want to thank everybody for participating today. The applicants did a great presentation. We heard a lot of great testimony, and commissioners, as always, you had extremely thoughtful comments. And I think where we are is that, generally speaking, the commission, as sort of conceptually as an approach, embraces this project, I think, and finds it exciting. And the commission, of course, has a long history of embracing contemporary architecture within historic context. But while some, I think, supportive it completely as is, that we did hear a number of comments that I think are worth the applicant reconsidering and thinking about some refinements to come back to us with. So in particular, there was a lot of discussion about the screen wall. And I think that really sort of has to do with this unique, and as we've discussed in our discussion today, this unique odd condition created by a lot that is not square and that has an angle. And I think in some ways gives you that opportunity to do something different, transitional, more creative, to relate to the park in a way that another corner might not. So I think that opens up a lot of our opportunities, but I think there is a question still about, exactly what those relationships and connections should be, and again, focusing mostly on the screen wall. But there have been also some other comments about general configuration and material. And I think on the main building, the commission generally feels that for this, relationship between the modern and the historic building to really be successful, that the restoration should be really accurate, and particularly on the brownstone portion. There's a lot of openness to something different at the dormer window, but I think it's still not quite there for everybody. So another look at that, and to see how that can be made a little more harmonious without necessarily being a replication. So I think these are, there's a lot of support conceptually for the approach, but there are some refinements that are worth considering, and we'd love to have you take another look at it and come back to us as soon as you're ready. And so with that, we'll take no action today, and we'll move to the next item. Thank you all.
Okay, we're going to move to public hearing item number 4, LPC 21-05356. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1387, lot 56, 900 to 910 Madison Avenue, aka 28 to 32 East 73rd Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is an apartment building with classical details designed by Sylvan Bean and built in 1939. The application is to modify the base of the building and install illuminated signage.
Commissioners, the applicant has joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Please unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you may begin. So if you could just unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Ng. I'm the architect representing Greene, the tenant going into this space. I will be presenting along with Geraldine Petineo, who is the head of store development, and she will hopefully be also invited as a panelist. I'm not sure if she has been. Project as noted is on 900 Madison Avenue on 28 East 73rd Street. It was noted that it has some classical detail. The scope of work is, as noted already, ground floor, but is partial limestone cladding with signage plaque and signage wrapping around the corner. I'm not sure how to control the slides.
You just click on the screen you see, and then you can advance using the mouse.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. So here's the corner view with the limestone cladding with the signage wrapping the corner. I'll advance the slide to, oops, too far. Oh, gosh, how do I go back? There you go. Ooh. Okay, sorry about that. It's a lot more responsive than I'm used to. Here's the plan showing, landmarks plan showing the location on Madison and 73rd. Next slide is just an aerial view of the building. It's the residential building above, and we're the ground floor tenant on the corner below. Next slide is just a collage of the Madison Avenue view. With it bubbled, the project area is the tenant on the corner. And on the 73rd Street side, where it wraps around. Next slide is of the destination photo and the certificate of appropriateness from 2010, where fenestrations were approved on the 73rd Street side. The next slide is of the tax photos of the same building, a view down Madison, and then a view towards looking towards the building. Next slide is just of some limestone cladded storefronts along Madison Avenue. I found the alternate location that's close by on 74th Street. That was also by Sylvan Bean with original cladded limestone and some other examples with limestone cladding. The next slide is existing storefront images of the existing material, which looks to be stucco with some molding and some simple framing. This is just some very small classical detail. And you see the new fenestrations from 2010 on the 73rd Street side. I'd like to cede the floor to Geraldine Petineo for the next 4 slides.
Hi, everybody. I'm hoping you can hear me. This is my first time presenting to Landmarks. So basically, we wanted to just show you the design that we're proposing. I think the biggest point that we want to really reiterate here is that we're proposing to clad the existing storefront, so actually not modifying any of the existing landmark storefront that's below it, but rather add a dressing of new limestone slabs over the existing, what we think is painted stucco. What we want to create is a kind of 3-dimensional element to the architecture of this corner. whilst maintaining a little sobriety. So that's why we've proposed limestone as a material, kind of paying homage to landmarks building around Madison Avenue and New York in general. We will be refurbishing the existing windows and framing just to make sure that they're all in perfect condition. And then the dressing will be cladded over the top as shown in the rendering. As Cynthia mentioned, the designation for landmarks is that the existing storefront today has some classical design only. And I think one of the big points that we want to really bring forward here is that our proposal is actually removable. So we have a 10-year lease on the space, and potentially we would be able to have the old landmark storefront brought back to its existing condition if needed. I also want to note that we had a unanimous approval from the community board, I think, which was really positive. I know that some of their points, was that this was a very attractive design proposal, and they found that it was a nice uplift to an otherwise kind of uninteresting building. Even though the original architect has done some other works around the area, they found that this particular application was not one that was particularly interesting. So they welcomed the new design, and they welcomed the element of dimensionality that we're adding. They also enjoyed the fact that we had the limestone material as a choice, and they enjoyed the fact that the proposal was removable. So really not affecting, especially the existing molding that we would be covering up, but would actually remain below it. So I will let Cindy take over again.
Do you want to look for the next slide? Here.
This is one of the other views, so showing facing north, and it really shows the correlation between our storefront and the way that it ends with the adjacent tenant, which has the storefront continue. So just showing again the fact that we're trying to juxtapose our limestone over the existing, in particular concealing that linear molding. I think you can go slides. And this is showing the view from the East 73rd Street side, which, as Cindy mentioned, was renovated in 2010 by the previous tenant to enable these 4 new window openings onto this otherwise bland facade. So we will be maintaining some of the visibility here in our design proposal, and just dressing the storefront leading up to a symmetry of the residential entrance, which is just to our right-hand side. This is the plan view, and on it I'll let Cindy take over with the presentation, but it shows some of the 3D dimensionality elements that we're proposing, with the way that the pillars in particular are going to be built on top of it, just to have some of those elements pop forward.
Thanks, Geraldine. I will continue on with the next slide. I think discussing the cladding over the existing and showing the dimension of the 6 inches, and it varies from the plan vertically, which we will see in the sections in the next slides below. The next slide is of the elevations, and I want to just point out that the limestone has 2 finishes. The signage at the corner is of a hammered finish to bring some more interest on the corner, with a carved logo into the signage, and the rest of the material is a honed limestone, which is nice and smooth and brings a sobriety to the storefront. And the other thing I want to point out is we're proposing 2 plaques on either side of the entry to have a balanced view at the entry, rather than just proposing one. We'd like to have 2. Next slide. This slide just shows our calculations for transparency, which we will maintain at minimum 50%. And it also just notes the differences in depth of the limestone, where it varies, 6 inches at the pillars, and then it's set back another 2 inches at top. And then the way the corner signage is more proud of the base. Next slide is just showing the window sections where we propose, we have some, I don't know if I can zoom in, but where we do have some walls in some areas where you'll see in the elevate rendering that they're wood panel walls, but we're going to maintain 50% at least of transparency at the storefront. Next section is section through the 73rd Street side, where we'll have sheer window, retractable window blinds that are set at least 16.5 inches back from the windows. And there, as I mentioned previously, these were new fenestrations that were added in 2010. So originally there was no fenestration on this side of the street. Next slide is, I'm just going to go through these fairly quickly. They're just architectural details on how we plan to apply the limestone to the existing storefront, where it's going to be at the ends, braided with a reveal and caulked with a matching caulk to the material. This is just a detail at the entrance, plan detail. This is a sill detail and how we're applying the limestone at the sill. And here is a detail at the adjacent windows above and our top of our limestone. And here's a detail at the top of the storefront where we're covering the existing, AKA classical molding details. Next slide is just the isometric showing the condition at the end of our, where we'll have to be cutting around the existing profile. And then this slide is just showing the material board, where, as I mentioned, we have two different types of limestone. One is a hone finish, and two is the hammered finish, where we have our logo. And then the metal material is just a brushed stainless. And here's a rendering of the front with our proposed 2 plaque signs. As you'll see, I mentioned the wood cladded panels that are beyond the glazing that will maintain at least 50% transparency. And you'll see how the pillars are proud of the upper band. And here's just the detail of the proposed plaques that are adjacent on either side of the entrance. They're going to be pin mounted so you don't see any screws. The next slide is of the proposed logo, which we will remove the LED as it's not allowed by zoning to be lit, but we will maintain the carved logo out of the limestone. The contrast in the shade should be enough of the dark versus the light to read the sign. And the next slide is just details of the existing storefront. As you'll see, it looks to be painted and patched many times over the years. And here's our additional photos of the existing condition. And that's a staff level. And that's the presentation for our proposal.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicant at this time? All right, I don't see any questions, so why don't we move to public testimony, and we may have questions after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Anthony to walk us through the testimony.
Thank you. We do have 2 signups. So I will bring in Lara from Friends of the Upper East Side. You should be in the meeting.
Hi, Laura Variali, representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Chair Carroll and Honorable Commissioners, the corner of Madison Avenue and East 73rd Street is one of the most diverse on the Upper East Side Historic District. Sylvan Bean's apartment building adds restrained classical elements to this corner that also contains a neo-Gothic church, an altered Italianate row house with picturesque Spanish colonial elements, and a neo-federal bank building. While very subtle, the classical details carry throughout the base of the building, relating the storefronts on Madison Avenue with the residential entrance on East 73rd Street, and with the brick structure above, sporting stylized Greek platforms, creating one cohesive unit. The proposed design for the corner storefront, while aesthetically pleasing, will obscure most of the details of the base, making the classical style even more difficult to read. The decision to clad only a part of the base, both on the Madison Avenue and East 73rd Street facades, breaks the continuity of Bean's style, and the new storefront treatment ends abruptly on both the avenue and side street frontages, creating a jarring transition to the original base. Finally, while Friends Preservation Committee appreciates the reversibility of the proposal, we are concerned about how the limestone-clad plywood will wear with time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next up, I have Kelly Carroll. Kelly, you should be in the meeting.
There we go. Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. HDC testified in 2009 that the proposed facade and storefront work at that time was moving in the right direction of regaining the subtle streamline elegance of the original design, and that more could be done. Instead, 12 years later, the original detail is being proposed to be completely covered over. This Sylvan Bean building dates to 1939, and its ribbed, streamlined ground floor is an axiom of this time. While not shown in the drawing set, the new storefront will also deviate from a stylized, ribbed service door entry in the same vocabulary with the ground floor. Concealing original features which unify the ground floor and the storefronts is a mistake and should not be permitted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We don't have any more signups, and I do not see any other hands raised for this item.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, did we receive any additional testimony in writing?
Just the community board resolution, which recommended approval.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to turn back to the applicants and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments. They were sort of about concealing the original detail in the first instance, and then the fact that it doesn't address the ground floor uniformly or breaks up the uniformity of the architecture of the ground floor. So would you like to address those comments?
Yes, I can just speak to it quickly. I do see their point that it does obscure the details. It's just, I guess, a matter of preference of whether that detail is important enough to be exposed. I feel that this cladding actually brings more interest to the corner than what's already there. Notwithstanding the fact that we are covering this very minimal molding detail that's being considered as super important to continue at this moment. And we want to emphasize that, yes, it is removable and it will not be 100%, concealed, as we're leaving parts of it exposed at the either end of the cladding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I am starting to unmute you or request to unmute you so that we can begin our discussion. So Commissioner Chapin, did you make a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the hearing.
You and Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. So as was presented, this is to clad a portion of the ground floor at the corner with new limestone in varying planes and to do new storefront infill within the openings created. Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you like to begin this discussion?
Sure. I think that the testimony identified the salient point here, which is the very subtle detail that Sylvan Bean employed on this building. It is a very restrained building, but that molding that wraps around is the defining feature of the storefront. And I think that anything that covers that is not going to be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
I agree with Commissioner Holford-Smith, and also I think that it has a very heavy appearance, particularly on the corner, which I think does not suit well with the building.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum?
Yeah, I agree with what Ann had said. I think that for me, the buildup of the limestone per se is not, could have been appropriate. I think that we do try to be very flexible with storefronts and allow for, acknowledge the fact that retail establishments come and go and changes happen all the time. And I think it's laudable that they're trying to do something interesting and sculptural in a material that is substantial and that relates to the building. I think though that, they got to look a little bit more closely and try, instead of to cover the whole thing and start from scratch, to really work with what's there and try to get a better feel for what's there and do your sculptural and aesthetic work within the spirit of what you've been given.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
I think Michael stated it perfectly. There's enough really good original detail, and there's enough of their concept that's worthy that they could somehow meld the two together. But as is, I don't think it's approvable.
Okay, great. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with all the comments. I think that the applicant is indeed trying to make but I think the corner detail is important as the testimony, and I agree with the comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
The reversibility almost convinced me, but not quite enough. And I think that the original should not be covered up to this degree, and I think they should just work with what's there, but not to this degree of covering everything.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Lutfi?
I agree with all of the comments that have been said.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with all the comments. Too much covering up.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
Agreed.
And Commissioner Shamir Barron?
Okay, as well.
Okay, all right. So I think that while there is some openness to reimagining this corner, I think that the consensus of the commission is that molding is important to the style of the building, and I think the unity of the base and base of the building and the architecture. But I think there is some a sense of openness to doing something creative below that or working within that as a feature that would be maintained. So we'll take no action today, and we'll ask you to continue to work with the staff on developing your plan, and we'll have you back as soon as you're ready. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're going to break for lunch now, and we are scheduled to return at 1:15. So commissioners, and maybe you can join 5 minutes early so that we can start right on time and get our setup going 5 minutes early. So I'll see you commissioners at 10 after 1, and I'll see the public at 1:15. And so commissioners, just turn your camera and audio off, and we'll ask all members of the public to leave the meeting now so that you can rejoin us at 1:15. Thank you.